So now we're going to head into the Account LookUp tab. And this is where all of the individual meter data lives. As a property manager, this is probably where you're going to be spending most of your time in WaterScope. And this is what it looks like. From the Overview tab, click on Account LookUp on the left-hand side of the page. Here you'll see a large chart, and this is the list of individual meters at the property showing on the Select drop-down menu. You can change properties in your account and see the list of individual meters for the other communities by clicking on another property. So it's kind of a big, dense table full of numbers. Maybe it looks a little intimidating at first, right? Let's take a quick step back, and I'm going to explain to you how this whole system works, from the water usage at the individual home, and then talk through how those numbers actually get from the meter itself into WaterScope. The reason for this is that when you understand the big picture of how the system works, this whole table is going to make much more sense, and it'll be really easy to use once you know what you're looking at. So let's say a resident in your community uses some water. He does the dishes, flushes the toilet, takes a shower. Water will leave the main line serving the whole community and flow into the individual line serving the home. As the water goes into the home, it passes through the meter. As it goes through the meter, it turns a little impeller blade, which causes the number on the meter register to go up. The number of times the blade turns indicates how many gallons have passed through the meter. In a closed plumbing system, the only thing that can turn the impeller blades is water. This means that the only reason why the number on the meter goes up is because water has been used. This is an important thing to remember because people are often surprised by how much water they use, especially if they've never had their water metered before. When they get their first bill, they may come to you and insist that their meter is broken because they can't believe that they could have possibly used that much water. Here's the thing. If a meter actually breaks, then the water consumption information can't get from the meter on the home into WaterScope. So we actually can't account for all of the water that the person has used. So we really end up billing them for too little water, and their bill is actually lower than it should be. And as you can imagine, that's not usually the source of many complaints. So usually it's the case that the person is just surprised by how much water they've actually used. There are a couple things that you can check for if a person is really sure that their bill is too high. And I'm going to talk about that in another video. But for now, just remember, most likely it's the case that the number on the meter is accurate and the person is just surprised by how much water they're using. So we've got water going through the meter, turning the blade inside it, which is making the number on the meter register go up. Then, throughout the day, every hour, each meter in the community is going to send a signal containing its reading. We call these hourly signals chirps. Throughout the day, as the meters are chirping, a device called the gateway is going to collect and store all these hourly reads. The gateway is a small white rectangular box that sits somewhere in the middle of the community on a phone pole or a tree where all the meter signals can reach it. For larger properties, there might be 2 or 3 gateways to collect all the reads. At the end of each day, around midnight, the gateway then sends a packet of data over the Verizon network, almost like a text message, and that contains all the hourly reads from all the meters for the day. Through the Verizon network, the data is then transferred onto the internet, into WaterScope, where you can then log on and see it. So each day, you should be able to log onto WaterScope in the morning and see the hourly data from each meter up through last night at midnight. So let's come back to the Account LookUp tab. How does all of that information fit into this table? First, here in the ID column, you'll likely see the name of the property, although in some accounts you may see a lot ID number instead. Here, in the consumer name and address columns, you'll see the home address or the lot number. Usually we don't store resident names here in the consumer name column just to keep things simpler for you when there's turnover, but this can be customized as needed to hold resident names instead. Next, the VN ID column here. VN stands for Verizon Network, and this is the unique identification number for each meter that keeps the data separate as it makes its way from the home into WaterScope. The E-reg number on the meter at the home must match the VN ID listed here in WaterScope. Otherwise, we'd be billing someone for water that was being used at a different home. Looking at an actual meter, this here on the barcode sticker is the E-reg number. Usually the E-reg number will be 7 digits long, starting with a 7, although for some meters like this one, it'll be 6 digits starting with a 9. This here on the meter register is the billing read, and this blue piece here is the antenna that sends the signal with the billing read to the gateway. Next up, the billing read column. The billing read column contains the number that was showing on the meter register as of midnight last night. This also represents the total number of gallons of water that have ever flowed through the meter since it was installed. Every time someone uses 1 gallon of water, the number on the meter goes up 1. So the number on the meter should never go backwards unless it's been flipped around. The billing read is used to calculate the consumption each month. We take the read from last month and subtract it from the read of the current month. And the difference between those two numbers is the number of gallons that passed through that meter over that time frame, and that number of gallons is what the resident is charged for. In the next column, we see the number of gallons that were used in the past 24 hours. WaterScope calculates this number by taking the billing read yesterday and subtracting it from today's billing read. If you see an NA in the 24-hour column, it means that WaterScope didn't have a read available at midnight at last night for that particular home, so it can't do the math to show you what the 24-hour consumption is. A typical daily usage is between 50 to 250 gallons of water, depending on how many people are living in the home and, of course, what their water habits are. It's really common for people to use more or less, it just depends. If, however, someone's using more than 300 gallons per day, that's getting into pretty high usage. Anything more than about 500 gallons per day is definitely something to consider high usage. The minimum flow rate and maximum flow rate columns apply to other meter types that you most likely won't encounter, so you don't need to worry about those for now. Skipping over here to the most right-hand column, this is where you'll go if you want to reach an individual meter's page. We'll go into more detail on that in another video, but know for now that you'll click on this little gauge icon to reach the individual meter page for the meter at this address. The conditions column will also be described in more depth in another video, but here you'll see the different flags that the meter is alerting you to for that home. Last but not least, the read date column. The read date is the day on which the most recent billing read over here in this column was received by the system. Ideally, we want this date to be today, which means that at midnight of last night, the gateway received a signal from this meter. Sometimes, though, the gateway may miss a meter's reading for the day. If the system doesn't have today's billing read, remember, it can't do the math to compute the 24-hour consumption over here. Usually, the gateway will pick up the meter's read after a day or two. However, if 3 days or more go by, it's unlikely that that meter is going to be detected again. So in this case, the system is going to mark it as a missing read. And that brings us to our first check that you're going to do when you're logging into WaterScope regularly in the Account LookUp tab. So now that you know what all of the columns in the Account LookUp table mean, we're ready to start using them. Click on over to the next video and I'll show you what to do.